WED Talks. We are diving deep into the stories, challenges, and triumphs of women and our allies in the defence and security sector. Empower, elevate, excel.
Hi, and welcome to episode 2. Today I speak to Cath from Amazon and Jo from Enterprise, and we go through things like how do you identify and recruit real top talent, and how do you keep that top talent? So I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoyed talking to these two amazing women. So today I am here with Cath, with Jo. Thanks for joining me. And Cath, if I start with your good self, so according to LinkedIn, you are all things recruitment and you seek to attract the best possible talent at Amazon. What does that mean on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, good question. Hi, thank you for having me, Jim, first of all. So yeah, my role is to basically be the kind of gateway, my team, for mid to senior hires into Amazon across Europe, Middle East and Africa. My team's about 400 to 500 strong across about 16 countries. And it's a mixture of sources, full life cycle recruiters, business partners, and then all of the kind of supporting functions you'd expect a recruiting team to have around project management, focus on diversity, data analysis, business intelligence. It's a really fun role and obviously in a very kind of fast-paced and interesting company.
Awesome. And what led you to Amazon?
Well, before Amazon, I've had 25 years plus, longer than I care to think about, running recruiting talent management teams across a variety of big organisations, mainly as an outsourced provider. And my last role before Amazon was running recruitment for the British Army for 3 years between 2018 and 2021. So I'm 2.5 years in at Amazon.
Thanks. And we're joined by Jo. Hi, Jo.
Hello.
So, Jo, I know that you do things in leadership for Enterprise. Tell me what you do.
So I have worked for Enterprise for 20 years. My current role, I look after our fleet and leasing and account development across Europe. So that's exciting. It's a job that didn't exist when I started at Enterprise. So it's quite cool to have done 20 years with a company that's kind of growing and changing. But I'm kind of the opposite end of the spectrum to Cath in that I work with existing talent to help them maximise what they do, specifically with our account management teams who are generally focused on problem solving and finding solutions for our customers around mobility. So that's moving goods and people safely around Europe, the globe. It's quite nice to have that talent that comes to you and then you're developing, inspiring and trying to create the leadership teams of the future and hear about Cath and they're recruiting them and bring them in.
So how do you identify talent? How do you look at somebody and think, actually, you may not necessarily know it yet, but you've got the skills to do this particular role or you've got the skills to be a leader?
What I would say is that competency trumps experience every time. So one of my favourite things is work ethic. I don't think you can teach work ethic. Like when you see somebody has a desire to learn and a desire to develop, that's one of my favourite things to see in somebody, because if you have that and you can work with that, that's great. And definitely when I'm interviewing and things like that, looking at kind of competency-based questions and competency-based understanding, because firmly believe you can teach people any skill, any information, but competencies are really the things that will see people rise to the top and come up with the best solutions for our customers. And I think one of the things that's really important to us is developing future talent as well. So you want to make sure that the people that you're putting in place have those competencies, because it's really important that they're throwing the ladder down and developing the people behind them as well.
And I completely agree. I mean, the language is slightly different and it's a really hot topic for the recruitment industry at the moment called skills-based hiring. But the point is exactly the same point Jo makes, which is actually it doesn't matter what you have done. Experience is irrelevant. Well, because everything that you need to know can be taught. What is much more important is your potential, attitude, your willingness to change, to learn new skills, your resilience, your adaptability. All of those are things that are much harder to teach. And the industry is working really hard to try and adapt that conundrum of how do you identify that through an interview and a selection process, where historically we've always focused on competency-based interviewing, which is tell me a time when you did X. And particularly when we're looking at young people, that's really hard, and trying to find a way instead that we can, and this is the challenge, at scale, an organisation like Amazon, where we recruit my team globally with my American colleagues, we recruit over 100,000 people a year, that mid-senior hiring. Amazon recruits over 1 million people a year. So mid-senior hiring in Europe, my team will do 30,000 hires. How do you, at scale, identify that potential? Because it's really easy to look at experience, much harder to really assess potential and skills. So we haven't got the answer, the silver bullet answer to that yet. And there's a number of things that various different organisations are trying.
And do you find that there's a difference when recruiting women and looking at inclusion, perhaps people where English isn't the first language, perhaps neurodivergent candidates? The challenges are multifaceted, aren't they? How do you bear that in mind again when you're trying to recruit at scale?
It is really challenging. Amazon has really aggressive targets internally around particularly growing gender diversity, which we have done well at. And we typically look at market availability, and then we set ourselves an aggressive target to be ahead of market availability. So, that will differ country by country and depending on the type of role you're recruiting. So, for example, engineers, it's tough. In reality, the market availability for female engineers in Poland is about 6%. So if we can recruit 10 to 12%, we're doing well. So we look hard at what's available, and then we have a number of ways in which we target bringing more people in at the top of the funnel. The really important thing trying to grow diversity is not to put in selective measures at the bottom of the funnel, because that's discrimination. But what you have to do is make sure that you have plenty of candidates who are coming in at the top of your recruiting funnel, so that by the time you get to the bottom of your funnel, you've got much more availability of diverse talent. And in terms of neurodiverse talent or other people with disabilities, we're working really hard to try and make our recruitment process as accessible as possible. And that's difficult. And what we try to do is ask every candidate, everybody, what accommodations do you need? Is there anything we can do that will make your recruitment process easier for you? Because that it's so individual. You can't presume or assume. So making sure you ask everybody what can be done, and then making every step, and it's a reasonable request, of course, to make sure that we adapt to that.
I used to chair Enterprise's Disability Committee, which was called TRI, and that was very much focused on enabling every employee to have what they need to thrive at work. And I think I'm Rachel of what Cath said. That's very different for every different employee, and actually really different for employees at their different life stages. When I was coming into the automotive industry, I was one of few women. I probably had very different needs to I had when I was a mum. I had a child that had a serious congenital heart defect. I needed different accommodations. Now I'm a single mum that travels extensively across Europe. And again, I need different support. So I think that's something that's really important for organisations to recognise, that what your employee needs on day one will be different to day 2 and day 3.
Yeah.
And as managers and hiring managers, you have to look to continue to make accommodations. And we talk about flexible working. How you need to work flexibly might be very, very different at your different life stages. And, if an employee goes through something traumatic, they might need accommodations. And I think being very open and upfront, because when it's on the employee to ask, that's like, the employee's having to come to you and say, I've got a problem, can you help me? The more transparent you can be, the more open you can be. We do lots of seminars on our benefits. We have an employee assistance program. We're constantly talking to our employees to remind them that's available. Because actually, when you don't need something at that time, you probably don't think about it. You don't store that information. It's not at the top of your mind. And then when you do need it later, you might not have that recollection. One of the things that I was involved in helping to design was something called a wellness plan. So what we did see was if somebody had specific accommodations, and I think your kind of neurodivergent example is a really good one, if they had specific accommodations in a role, we saw that some of those employees were then not applying for promotions in other departments. And the reason for that, when we dug into it, was, well, my manager's Gemma, she's really good, she understands my disability, or she understands my different ability, and she makes really great accommodations. But I don't know Cath, and I'm nervous about the change, so I won't apply for the promotion, even though actually I have the right competencies, if you go back to the answer. So putting that wellness plan in place, and actually that we had that, so that travels with the employee when they move roles, saying, actually, my name is Jo, these are my concerns, these are my challenges outside work, these are the things that help me thrive in work, have been a brilliant initiative. But again, you can't tell people about those things once. I've probably done 10, 15 seminars on wellness plans. And every time somebody will say, that's the first time I've heard is that, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And I do relate to, I don't work in recruiting, but I know that my colleagues that work in recruiting, we are saying to candidates proactively, do you have special accommodations? Is there anything that we can do to help you in advance? We give certain candidates longer for the interview. Certain conditions, we will give the candidate the questions to prepare in advance.
Yes.
And I think that's a big societal shift around what do you need versus, well, I was really open. If you told me you needed something, I would help you. Because I think the mentors and the best people that have recognised me and have supported me in my career I think that's a sign of a really good manager when you go, Cath, you don't see yourself today. What is there a challenge? Is there something I can help you? That's a lot harder in a virtual world. I think pre-COVID, as a manager, if I was in the office, I would pride myself on being able to see actually that person, their body language isn't great today, or they seem concerned about something. I think when you're all on a team call, that can be really challenging because, you can mute yourself, you can turn off your camera. So I really try and watch for those signs of, is somebody not engaged in the meeting? Does somebody have a concern? Has somebody not said something?
And that's harder. And it's one thing when you've got them as employees, but in the recruiting process, the thing that kind of, again, hinders diversity is many people who might have disability or be neurodivergent or might have any sort of different accommodation may not want to say because they perceive wrongly, but understandably, that it might hinder their ability to be hired. So I think there's still a long way to go for all of us as organisations to make even more inclusive and overcome that kind of stigma.
And you both work in clearly jobs with a lot of responsibility, with a lot of travel. How do you manage that alongside family life, home life, personal life?
Well, one of the things I did when I moved to Amazon, actually, from the job leaving recruiting for the army, was having my email on my phone. And I made a really conscious decision not to do that because I know that if I know it's there, when I'm sitting on the sofa in the evening, I will scroll through my email and I would be answering it and I would not switch off and I'm not engaged properly with my family. And I've got 2 teenage son, husband. So that's one thing. And I'm really clear with the rest of my team that I do that because actually I encourage them to do it as well. It's occasionally irritating, but the pros outweigh the cons massively. The other thing is I try and keep a really healthy sense of perspective about the job I do. I mean, we just deliver loo rolls really fast. It's one line that we like to use to kind of relieve the pressure on the team sometimes. Ultimately, this isn't life or death, what we do. So keeping a healthy sense of perspective. And I am really, really firm about boundaries and making sure that I make time, evenings, weekends. I'm very, very, very virtually never work at weekends. And actually, I have a great boss who is based in Seattle, which is generally most of the year 8 hours behind us. She is absolutely rigorous about not having me on a call in the evening or other colleagues from parts of the world. So they start early in the morning. And typically my one-on-ones with her are 3 p.m. my time, 7 a.m. her time. So there's a whole host of things around keeping boundaries right and making sure the work doesn't come home.
Yeah, and an interesting adaptation that she then makes to do those really early mornings to make sure that isn't imposing on your time.
Yeah.
That's great.
I'm a big fan of probably 80-20. I think I really try and plan my time very well. I work with a really supportive boss, so he understands that I am a single mother. I need to plan my childcare. I need to do things like that. So I think 80% of everything is always planned in advance. But you also, if you want to be successful, you have to understand, I think sometimes there's a need for flexibility and sometimes things will come out the woodwork. Now, if that's the rule and you're constantly running around from left to right, I think you will burn out. But I think you can manage the exceptions. So I think that's really important. I actually think it's really important for my children. I wasn't a great person on maternity leave. One of my maternity leaves ended up building a school because I just wasn't mentally stimulated. And I am a better parent when I am mentally stimulated, when I'm happy at work, definitely. And I think if you ask my children, they would say that. I also think it's really important to have things for you outside work. I am quite religious about doing Pilates 5 times a week. I generally get up quite early and do that. And I find that really helps me start the day. I have some me time, I have some space. I feel like I've done something. I feel like I've got into a really good space. I also like playing sport outside of work. And I think that really benefited me from having that kind of social side. I grew up with 2 brothers. I grew up in a very sporting environment. And I actually think that probably helped me be a successful female 15 years ago when perhaps we weren't as conscious about diversity and things as we are today. And I think we would always say in enterprise we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. I can remember our head of HR talking to me about what's the most important position in American football. We're an American company, so I've actually only really recently learned about American football because my daughter liked Taylor Swift. But, we can talk about the quarterback. The quarterback's the key position. But actually, you don't have success if you have a team of, I don't even know how many people are on an American football team, but let's say 15 quarterbacks wouldn't be successful. And I think from sport teams, you learn to recognise that, you know, you need the Ben Stokes flashing brilliance, but you need Jojo Root to kind of slowly build an inning. And I think there's a lot of lessons that I've learned from sport that have really helped me in business. I don't think I would get it right. Sometimes I have a week that feels a bit much, bit of a lot of work. And then my boss will say to me, we travelled on a Sunday, you did this, take 4 hours back with the kids. So it's a seesaw rather than a balance.
And interesting that you mentioned sport. So, Cath, I was actually chatting to one of your teenage sons and mentioned that I was going to speak to you on a podcast, and I asked him if he had any insightful questions that he might want to ask. And he asked one really interesting, insightful question about empowerment of women, which I'll come on to. But he did say that I should ask you about getting cards in hockey and how many cards you'd received and whether or not there are any lessons from that.
Yeah, he would, wouldn't he? There's been a few this season, actually. It's interesting because I am, I don't know what it says about me, I am really, really calm at work. And my team would tell you that they never see me angry or riled. But on the hockey pitch, yeah, another side comes out, the aggression. I'll put it down to being half Italian or something, I don't know. But yeah, there's been a couple of green cards recently, which I'm not proud of.
There you go.
We're probably with the opposite there. I've never had a card.
What?
So
That's amazing.
and let listeners into a little secret is that I've played hockey with both Cath and Jo, and yeah, I don't think I've ever seen Jo aggressive on the pitch. You're very nice.
I make sure I make the time to exercise and do things that are important to me outside work. I always have in my work travel bag a pair of trainers, running leggings, sports bra and a vest. I don't like when I'm travelling in a strange city, I have to make sure that I feel safe to go out for a run, but I can always do Pilates. I can always do something workout in the room. And I think if I can just find 20 minutes to do that, it makes everything better. But yeah, no, definitely I have seen the Italian redmen.
The other question he suggested, Cath,
Right.
he thought that I should ask you what advice you would have to listeners around empowering women in the workplace, which I thought was very sensible. And then he obviously undid all of that with a question about cards in hockey, which I thought was quite amusing. But yeah. So a question from your teenage son: what can you do? What can we all do to better empower women in the workplace and make sure that we're representing women's views, make sure that people have that opportunity to thrive?
Good question. Empowerment is a topic that is really close to my heart. And I think, when I reflect, I think if I had to identify one leadership skill that is the most critical in being able to scale from being a good manager to a really effective leader, it is being able to empower your team. I've seen it done well and I've seen it done badly. And I've learned over the years from observing others, from some formal training and development, from my own experiences. You know, when it's done badly, and I observed it being done badly by a previous leader, it can really hinder organisational agility and employee development, as well as job satisfaction, a whole host of other things. When you get it right, you foster an environment where your teams are trusted to make decisions. You give them a framework, you tell them what the objective is, you don't tell them how to get there. And you leave them free to make those small decisions, choices every day, to come up with ideas, to act upon them, in the knowledge, and this is really important, in the knowledge that the accountability, you might devolve the responsibility, but you can never devolve the accountability. The accountability sits with you. So if they do something, maybe the complete car crash, you are accountable. And making sure that you tell them that, 90 times out of 100, I know you're going to get it right. The 2 times you get it wrong, that's fine. We're going to learn from the experience together, and I'm going to take the responsibility. And I learned that particularly in my time running recruiting for the army, because I inherited a team where this was it just didn't happen at all. They had not been empowered. All the decision making was held in the centre, at the top of the organisation. And around the country, they would identify a problem or have an idea, tell their boss, their immediate superior, and then as far as they were concerned, that was it. And they would wait for the question, the decision, the problem to go up the chain, and then for the answer to come back down. And sometimes it would, weeks later. Other times it wouldn't. But as far as they were concerned, if they'd done their thing, they would shrug, move on. And recruiting was in a pretty dire state at that point. And I needed them to be agile, take decisions quickly, locally to the problem. So I created this really cheesy strapline. And my job title was CEO of Recruiting Group. So be your own CEO. And CEO stood for curiosity, empowerment, ownership. So these are the 3 things that I want you all to do. Be curious, be empowered, and take ownership. And I kept repeating that mantra until it became slightly more comfortable and less cheesy in my mouth. And I knew it was landing when I would get people emailing me going, Cath, I was my own CEO today, I did this. And over time, that focus on empowerment and culture change really made a massive difference alongside a whole lot of other things we did. But then the important thing about that was I was taking a bit of a punt then, I was kind of guessing. But when I then joined Amazon, I'd learnt the lessons. And Amazon's obviously a huge, really complicated organisation, complicated, complex, and is quite renowned for being very demanding as an organisation. And I knew there was no point trying to learn and understand everything. And its company prides itself on detail and everyone knowing all the data and all the facts and all the detail. I thought, if I try and do that, I'm going to drive myself insane. But I knew from my army experience that I didn't need to do that. I was very clear on what my role was and what my role wasn't. And I focused instead on empowering my team, making sure they were capable, making sure they felt empowered and trusted, and then that they would know and understand all the detail. And of course, occasionally, if it's a big decision, yes, of course I get into the detail, or if something has gone badly wrong, I get into the detail, but generally I don't. And that means that I can then focus on the stuff that's important. It's easy to take refuge, I think, as a leader if you're a bit unsure of yourself. Take refuge in the detail. But that's a cop-out because you shouldn't be doing it. And my real mantra, and I say this a lot to my team, is only do what only I can do. So if I find myself doing something that one of my team can do, I've made a mistake and I shouldn't be doing it because I should be devolving it to them. And more specifically, you asked about empowering women. That was a more general answer, I guess, on empowerment. I think recognising the more nuanced approaches that women will tend to take and the way women will, and this is a generalisation, clearly it's not all women, but the research shows that the famous stat around a woman will apply for a job only if she's sure she can do 100% of what the job description says, whereas a man will typically apply if he thinks he can do about 60%. Right? So knowing and understanding that is one thing that I take into the workplace when I'm encouraging people around me to take the risk, particularly take the risk. You can learn it afterwards. Back yourselves.
Thank you. How about you, Jo? So I think, I come from a very different place of experience than Cath. I think 2 of the most important things that I think that I can do for other women is to be authentic and to be vulnerable. I think people learn far more from me or are far more inspired by me when I talk about mistakes I made.
Totally.
So one of the first stories I tell teens when I meet them and talk about account management is I made far more mistakes in meetings when I thought I had to get the answer right there and then. Otherwise the customer would think I didn't know enough. And actually, my standard answer now in any situation is very often, that's a really great question. I've got some ideas about that myself, but I've also got 3 or 4 experts that I want to go back to and speak to in my business. And a colleague that I know did something similar with a different customer. And I think actually, I talked to all of those people and I'll come back to you with the benefit of my experience. Now, that's a pretty good code for absolutely no, but I'm going to go away and I'm going to find people who do it. But I think definitely talking to people about your mistakes and being open, because we only learn from mistakes and we only develop. And actually, you see that in cultures. We just rent cars. We don't just rent cars, we rent trucks and we rent all sorts of other things, just in case anybody from work is hearing this. But we're not saving lives. And so having those open cultures where people are happy to put my hand up and go, I got this wrong. Nobody's getting shot for it, and probably the only thing I would say is an exception about ethics is incredibly important to an enterprise. So if you're making unethical decisions, that would be different. But I got this wrong. Most of the times I've personally got something wrong. I've known I'm going to get it wrong. I have a great mentor, I call Brendan Keane, who really helped me learn that perfect is the enemy of good. So if you wait for 100%, you'll never get there. Particularly to that recruiting point that Cath talked about. If you wait for 100%, you're never going to be ready to apply for the job. I have a kind of 70% rule. Like if I'm 70% sure, I'm going to go with that. And sometimes actually I think it's really important to make a decision. And if you get a decision wrong, change quickly. Not making a decision can be just as dangerous. One of my favourite things that I say to people is you're not just missing. And I definitely see my female colleagues say that way more than my male colleagues. People stand up and say, I'm just this, or I'm just looking after this. I'm like, you are not just anything. You are a really important cog in a wheel. That tends to be more female employees, but then we also see some of the shyer male employees. And I often say what is good for women is good for men indirectly, because actually you bring forward way more diverse talent by thinking about, okay, what's good, what could be a perceived barrier. And one of the things that we talk a lot about in enterprise is equity. Equality is giving everybody the same chance. Equity is giving people what they need. What I need to be successful as a single mother of 2 children who has access to her own car and can work flexibly is very different to what perhaps a single mother on a really low income who is cleaning at night to put food on her family's table needs to enable her to do her job flexibly. So I think those things are really, really important, to have that vulnerability, to have that authenticity, and then actually, what is equity? What does that person need to be successful? And if you model that as a leader and a role model, and that's what I hope that I inspire other people to do. Okay, well, am I getting it right 100% of the time? No. Do I get it right 70% of the time? I hope I do. We had somebody come into our team a couple of years ago who'd clearly been burnt by a previous line manager. And carbon copy is my least favourite thing. If you're sending an email on carbon copy to cover yourself that I've told that person it's gone up the chain, if an email is important enough to send it to me and tell me why I need to have it. If you're just carbon copying me, that's not an engagement. That's not a good dialogue. And I felt very proud, I think, when this guy spoke out and said, actually, Jo's not like that, the line manager. She messes up. She will put her hands up. We have a culture where we talk, we encourage, we find the right solution and we do it and we move forward together. I really liked what Cath said about accountability. If you're the line manager, you have the oversight, you have those systems in place, you shouldn't be getting shocked. You shouldn't be getting surprised. And I think if you have that openness, that authenticity, that vulnerability, and everybody understands if they're worried about something, they can come and talk about it and we'll make it better. That's, I think that's just a great way to work. And I'd want to do that in my home life as well. I want my kids to feel like, okay, they can talk to me about those things as well, because I just think, most of those things are, and in great sports teams, like you see the documentaries with the great sports teams, it's where somebody put their hand up and says, I've been reading Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. Actually having a culture where you can have an open rumble and go, you know what, guys, I think we're on the right path here. And I think that's really, really
Yeah, I love
important.
that rumble topic. We're talking about that word quite a lot lately from Brené Brown. I'm laughing because it's Mother's Day today in the UK as we record this. And I suggested to my kids a few days ago that rather than taking a tenner off their dad and buying me a box of chocolate, I would really like them to put a bit more time and effort and maybe cook me some supper. And I said, and the answer was, great, you're empowering us to choose what we're cooking you for dinner. I was like, I absolutely am. And then Charlie was like, yeah, when you say empowerment, what you really are is giving us an order, isn't it? No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work with a kid. No, not always. So just to finish off, I know you've given me some really good mantras throughout, but is there a particular quote, something that speaks to you around leadership, around what you do?
The one I always say when anyone asks me about a quote is, and I'm not sure who said it originally, but the person said it to me was a lady called Dawn Sims, who was Chief Operating Officer at Capita, who was my boss for a while, and she's brilliant. Really, really inspiring role model for a whole host of reasons. But the thing she used to say, which I have totally lived and died by in my career, is ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Excellent.
Jo? Yeah, I'm laughing because I mentioned Brendan earlier, and that's another one of the things that he said is far more easy to ask for forgiveness than permission. I think one of my favourite quotes, and it came to me a little bit later in my career, is never sit in the comfy chair. And again, I don't know who said that originally, but I read Jake Humphrey said that when he left Formula One and he had the job of his dreams and everything was easy and he was at the top of his game and he went to do something different. And I think that resonated with me a lot at the time, because I probably was a little bit guilty sometimes of sitting in the comfy chair. And I think since I have been braver in my career, since I have been willing to jump, I've definitely seen the benefits of that. There are people in any organisation that are very happy at the level they're at and don't want to move, and forcing them to move might be the wrong thing. But, for me, sitting in the comfy chair is not the place that I want to be, not where the good things happen. So our hockey captain yesterday, and we had some subs for the first time in a while. And so asking us to give 10, 15% more and run our all because we would have 5 minutes off, rather than kind of knowing that we weren't going to get a break. And I think the people that are the best at getting the most out of themselves, the businesses that are the best at getting the most out of their people, and the sports teams that are the best at that are ultimately the most successful. I think probably another quote, and this is my brother who said this, is what if you have a great day? Quite often, I think women in particular are governed by fear. What if I make the wrong decision? What's going to happen? But actually, what if it goes right? And I look at that and I think, yeah, I've got the information. I've been good at this for the rest of my career and surrounded by good people making good decisions. So why do I need to be scared?
So a massive thank you to Cath and Jo for joining me. Some really interesting things there around how we can identify and recruit the right people. I'm really interested in what Jo had to say about actually if we can recruit those intrinsic values, then we can teach most other things. And I loved Cath's words of wisdom around when she joined Amazon and decided to have that real clear switch off from work and the discipline around emails. Love that. Not sure I've quite got that yet, but something to aspire to. So please do let us know what you thought of the podcast. Let me know if there's any guests that you would recommend or if you want to come and talk to me. And I'm really excited that next week we'll be talking about a topic that is really dear to me. We're going to be talking about domestic abuse and relationships and how people can get support. We're also going to be talking about how domestic abuse can impact on military families in particular and those in services. My guest is going to be talking about an exciting new program where people can actually get support and help if they're concerned that their actions might be harming their loved ones and their relationships might be unhealthy. So a really fascinating conversation. I hope that you'll join me, and please do have a look at the Women Empowering Defence website. Get in touch, talk to us, and let us know what you think.
Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for more episodes coming soon.